We're glad to see you. We're glad to have you join us. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of kick us off here with a little bit of a recap of what's changed over the past 5 years and what do we see coming in the future. Okay? All right. So this is not based on my opinion, my thoughts, or anything. I have a little bit of input into this. This is mainly derived from a lot of information from the Singularity University in Silicon Valley, California. And they do a lot of forward thinking on what's coming from, especially from changes from a technological standpoint. And I follow them quite closely as to what some of the trends may be. But those of you who were with us 5 years ago, you might recall in Charlotte, I introduced us to something called the Exponential Age back in the spring of 2017. So almost 5 years ago, we introduced something or a concept called the Exponential Age. How many of you in the room remember that? Anybody recall that? All right, so we're going to do a little bit of a rehash of that, but we're going to talk about what's changed, what's actually come to fruition. All right? So that was all based on, a lot of this was based on the introduction of what we called linear growth, or the linear exponential growth curve. And so when you grow exponentially, it's different than growing linearly. So we as humans have been conditioned since the beginning of time to think linearly. And when you think linearly and you operate in a cadence of linear growth, just to give you an example, that's a step like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Exponential growth or exponential progression is like 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. It doubles every time. And so technology is doubling at a very high rate of speed right now. It's doubling at an exponential growth rate. All right. So let's take a look at what was predicted and sort of what's happened. Back 5 years ago, they were making a prediction that over the next 15 to 20 years, more than half of all jobs would disappear. That's a lot. Many of the business models and designs that we're operating today would not be in existence, or they would fail in the 21st century. So, just for example, take a look at what's happened to a lot of the offices and a lot of the office complexes in the central business districts, a lot of the major cities right now. Not just in the major cities, but all over the country in the last year and a half. A lot of them are still sitting empty right now. I know in Chicago, who here is from Chicago? Jordan, what's going on downtown Chicago right now? Are the businesses coming back to downtown Chicago? A lot of the office space is still kind of empty right now, right? Yep. So technology was something that was accelerated through the COVID period, the use of technology. And a lot of people have adapted to that and gotten used to it. So there's a lot of empty office space out there. That was something that they had predicted would occur over the next 15 to 20 years. It just got accelerated by COVID is all. We introduced that artificial intelligence is accelerating and would drive us into what's known as the exponential age. IBM Watson was the perfect example. We introduced this concept a few years ago, and this AI computing technology that's taking place again is becoming more and more prevalent. And so just to give you an example, we mentioned 4 or 5 years ago that even young lawyers coming out of college are having a very difficult time finding employment, because you can go online and you can find legal advice with 90% accuracy as opposed to 70% accuracy with a human. That's how good artificial intelligence has become. All right? So 4 years ago, we welcomed the new industrial age called the exponential age. And so we're going to dive into this a little bit and what's changed, what's come about. We're not going to rehash the whole presentation of what we did the last time, but there was a couple of industries that they were predicting that would be disrupted over the next 5 to 10 years. Industries such as the automotive industry, manufacturing, healthcare, agriculture, and education. There was a prediction that 70 to 80% of the jobs related in these fields would disappear over the next 20 years. That's a lot. There's going to be a lot of new jobs though, but we just don't know quite what they are yet, okay? So let's just take a look at a few examples of what has come about and what's been introduced, say, 5 or 6 years ago. A few examples include Uber and Airbnb. They are the largest hotelier, the largest taxi in the world, yet they own no hotels and no taxis. That's a prime example of what technology has done in a disruption that has occurred over the last 5 years. Companies like Apple and Tesla, 5 or 6 years ago, started investing very, very heavily in the autonomous automobile, while traditional auto manufacturers were still trying to just make a better car, okay? Tesla and Apple invested 10 times more money than all of the other traditional automotive manufacturing companies together in autonomous vehicles. A few years ago, we touched on the concept of driving it on in a car possibly becoming obsolete. The first self-driving cars became public in 2018, and the automotive industry started to be disrupted in 2020. Have you noticed today how many of the traditional automotive manufacturing companies are now producing electric vehicles? 5 years ago, it was Tesla, right? Just about every car commercial that you're seeing on TV today, they're touting their electric vehicles now. Ford just went big with their $11 billion investment that they just announced this week that they're going to make in Tennessee and Kentucky, just for electric vehicle technology and manufacturing. In the future, we talked about you may not even want to own a car. You'll just call a car on your phone. It'll show up, take you to your location, drive you to where you want to go. You just pay for the use of the time. You won't need to park it. You just pay for the time that you use it, the distance that you drove, and you can be productive while you're driving. And, you know, we talked about this. Some of our kids or our grandkids may not even own a car or get a driver's license in the future. I couldn't fathom that. When I was 15, 16 years old, I couldn't wait to get a driver's license and get a car. I'm already starting to see it. Some of these kids could care less about getting a driver's license. They're not in a hurry. They just call up an Uber. Pretty soon, they're just going to be able to call up any car, especially if it's an autonomous vehicle that can just come pick you up, like a Domino's pizza delivery vehicle. Anybody seen those? Yeah. So if that happens, why would you need a driver's license? Real estate, we mentioned 5 years ago that real estate would start to change, that technology was going to make it so that people could commute and work at the same time. We saw an acceleration of that through COVID. A lot of people discovered that they could work remotely. And so they made a migration of moving to areas where they wanted to be in a better, more desirable location. They could work from home. That trend hit Greenville, South Carolina, where Angel and I used to live for the past 20 years. And that trend hit Greenville hard and made it very attractive for us to sell our home in Greenville and just go ahead and accelerate our plan and move to the beach house. So a lot of people made a accelerated migration out of some of the major cities into some of the rural areas because they can work from home and they can be just as productive. Consumer 3D printing started to go mainstream back in 2016, and it's anticipated that by 2027, about 10% of everything that's manufactured would be 3D printed. Some of our members are already in this business. The medical healthcare industry is also going to be impacted as well. Anybody know what this thing is? Anybody here a Trekkie?
Tricorder.
Yeah, that tricorder. Dr. Spock basically introduced us to that, but shortly after I gave that presentation 5 years ago, the $10 million Qualcomm Tricorder X Prize was awarded later that year to an outfit called the Final Frontier Medical Device Group. They're now producing something called the Dexter. The Dexter will measure several biomarkers with your body to tell you if you're having any kind of health issues or any kind of symptoms that you ought to be paying attention to. Well, guess what? That's not the only device out there. Who in the room owns an Apple Watch? Yeah. An Apple Watch will basically do a lot of the same thing, right? There's other things out there as well, other technologies called the Oura Ring, the Whoop Band. Anybody heard of any of these things? Yeah. We have a member, and I don't think that they would mind me telling this story. I'm not going to divulge any names, but we had a member that was exercising. They were out riding a bike, started feeling some chest pains, and just thought, okay, well, this is just chest pains because maybe I was overexerting myself. Well, they looked at their Apple Watch and saw that some of their vital signs were not right, and the blood pressure was off, the pulse rate was off, and so got called an ambulance to come pick them up, took them to the hospital, and they were having a heart attack. So they credit that Apple Watch today for possibly saving their lives. It's also going to affect the agricultural industry. Mike Thorough in the back, okay? Mike is a prime example. His company produces metering technology for agriculture and for golf courses, all right? Mike, I'm sure you, and you're an old ag guy too. I mean, you grew up on a farm, right? Farming and driving the farming equipment and stuff like that. The technology in farming today is changing very rapidly to where you don't have to have people out in the field any longer picking or harvesting or planting or fertilizing or watering the crops. All of this technology exists today. You can set up a geofence today on these huge mega farms and have these robots or these machines that'll go out and they will plow the field, sow the field, fertilize the field. And it's just, you set it all up, it's like setting up a CNC machine, and the machines will take care of this already. That has replaced a lot of manual labor, right? The solar energy has been on an exponential curve for the last 30 years, but it was predicted that solar power would totally replace coal power. And that solar energy is going to make energy very, very cheap. Well, let's just step back for just a second. They're saying they were predicting at the time 5 years ago that solar energy would replace coal production and put them out of business by 2025. Well, it's pretty close to 2025. We're just a few years away. Well, let's just take a look at what it's done. Since 2008, coal production has come down probably about 30–40%, right? So it has come down significantly. But is that all due to solar energy? No. Look at what's happened to LNG or natural gas. Natural gas production has gone up. Okay? So their prediction that the solar industry would replace the coal energy, I think is a bit off or maybe a bit too soon. This idea that wind energy and solar energy is going to completely replace fossil energy, I'm not a true believer in that, we're seeing sort of a shift toward that, but I'm not convinced that that's something that is going to happen just as quickly as they tend to think. The average lifespan 5 years ago was about 79 years, and at the time, our average lifespan was increasing about 3 months for every 1 year, or so they were saying, all right? And they were saying that by the year 2036, the way that the curve is going right now, that we could be adding 1 year of life to every year of our own life. So, you know, the age range is growing exponentially as well, according to them. Well, guess what? If you Google what's the average age of a human being today in America, it's still 79 or 80 years old. Yeah, are we getting better at technology, at being able to use better methods and better health procedures and things like that, taking better care of ourselves, better nutrition, better education, those kinds of things? Yes, but I don't think we're growing quite at the exponential rate that they had predicted. They were saying that, you know, by the year 2036, we could be living to well beyond 100 years. That may come to fruition, but today I just don't see that happening. We still have an average age span of about 79 to 80 years right now. The cheapest smartphones, this, again, 5 years ago, the cheapest smartphones were about $10 in Africa and Asia. And so about half all of the humans on Earth today, this is today, on a smartphone, okay? So what this has done is it's given access to education. One of the biggest things that has occurred is that a lot of higher level, not only just the basic preliminary education, but higher level education has been elevated now to online status. You can get a Harvard MBA online, right? And so now that means that anybody in the world can get a higher level education through a smartphone if you wanted to. Now that might be tough, all right? But the access is there. It used to really irk me to go visit my son in college. And this was, what, 5, 6 years ago? And he'd be sitting in his apartment. We'd talk about, hey, son, how are your classes going? They're going great. Well, tell me about them. Well, he said, well, half of them I do sitting right here on my bed, on my computer. And I was just floored. I said, what? What do you mean you're doing half your classes on a computer? He said, yeah, they're online now. So not only that, COVID accelerated that. I feel sorry for these kids that they're having to sit there and we're doing all their classes online. Tuition didn't go down, right? They weren't getting the college experience that I thought I was paying for, right? But what that has done is it's opened it up to the world now. You don't have to go to Ohio State. You don't have to go to the University of South Carolina or Clemson or somewhere like that anymore. You can do it online. Why these universities are continuing to build these big brick and mortar buildings and these big capital programs, it's flabbergasting to me. But that's what's occurring. So now the technology is there to get an education across the world. All right, let's talk about finances for a moment. 5 years ago, we talked about how Bitcoin became mainstream back in 2016, and it's grown in popularity. How many of you guys still carry cash? Huh? I carry it, but it's usually to give to somebody in my family. All right? It's not to pay for something. It's usually to give to, you know, Dad can have 20 bucks. You know, Angel, hey, can I? And same thing with Angel. I mean, hey, Angel, you got $5 or something that I can, you know, we rarely pay for anything with cash. It's usually with a credit card. I can tell you right now, I'm getting more and more to where I pay with Apple Wallet because it has a revolving code. It's more secure than a credit card, right? And everything basically is paid for either on this or on our computer or a credit card. Cash is just, I have it. Do we think we're going to a cashless society? I don't know. How do you pay people under the table if you go to a cashless society? I don't know that that's going to happen. Yeah, there you go. Is that advancing? See if we can do it this way. Here we go. All right. Angel and I live on an island that is 18 miles away from the closest store. That may not sound like a long way to some of you people, but it does to me. All right. When we were so used to having it just a mile and a half down the road from us in Greenville, 95% of what I buy is right here. And it shows up on my doorstep in 1 or 2 days. And it's paid for on my phone with my credit card or PayPal or something like that. Look at what's happened to logistics. I mean, I haven't had a drone fly to my house yet. Has anybody had a drone delivery yet? It's coming. They're doing it in some cities already, right? Is it going to displace the big brown truck or the big yellow truck or FedEx or any of those guys? I don't know. But that's what they're touting. That's what they're saying is coming. All right? I kind of look forward to the day because I have the big brown truck show up at my house about once a week delivering something. Now we have not, you can do it. Angel orders groceries online all the time, but she hadn't got to the point where she's having them delivered to our house yet. She and I will go and stop, have them delivered out to our car, right? But we haven't gotten to the point where we'll have them delivered to our house yet. But they'll deliver them to the island if we wanted them to. Has anybody had food delivered to your house? Yeah? So that's becoming more and more prevalent. All right. These were just some of the things that they were talking about 5 years ago, right? And sort of what's come about. Any questions, comments, observations about what we just talked about? Are you still awake? Okay, all right.
Kevin, in that research or study, is there any comment about the displaced labor force because of all the disruption? Are we going to have enough actual jobs that we would consider jobs to sustain people?
What was discussed and what's heavily discussed today is that with the implementation of technology and the digital digitization of everything, people's skills are going to have to rise. They're going to have to get a whole new higher level skill set, or they're going to fall to the bottom of the rung, because those lower level repetitive jobs, anything that can be repeated as a task, is likely going to see some sort of automation. Especially they keep raising wages, okay? Those two lines are going to cross. And when those two lines cross, guess what businesses do? We get very creative and we start figuring out ways to eliminate that. Because with people, Rob Gilmore, who is not with us here today, Rob says, I want a business without people. People get sick. People call in sick. People have to, they make errors. I want a business without people. So as people are making higher wages, as we start to invent new technologies, Tim Allen's company, Tim is a virtual company. He's in a highly technological field. I'm sure you're seeing a lot of this kind of evolution right now, especially in VR and IR and all those kind of things. It's accelerating, guys. So people's level of skills are going to have to elevate, or they're going to find themselves falling out on the bottom of the rung. It's going to be difficult for them to find. That's what they're saying. Any other questions or comments?
Kevin, what are your thoughts now? If I remember correctly, we have about 10 million open jobs in this country, 8 million people on unemployment. that, what do you think are the main driving factors of that? Is it COVID? Is it geography? Is it skill set?
Yes.
All three of them.
Yes.
Which one would be most, if there is, let's just say COVID was not a factor. Do you think that'd still be a big gap there?
Most of the open job positions, most of them, and please feel free to disagree with me, this is what I'm seeing, are at the lower levels, right? The basic lower $15, $20 an hour levels. And so, yeah, there's a financial situation right now that's driven a lot of that. Till that weeds its way through, those people, if they haven't been working on improving their skill sets, their digital acumen, a lot of those people are going to find themselves on the outside looking in. Yeah, there's a need for those people, but the problem is there's a huge gap in skill set and the ability. You know, there's a job requirement with a skill set, but the underlying force, their skill set is down here. There's a huge gap there, and it's growing wider and wider and wider.
I interviewed somebody on a podcast recently that was an HR person, and I've heard a different kind of just opinion of all of this going on, that really pre-COVID, we had a low unemployment issue. We had trouble finding people. If we think back to where we were, it was still hard to find people prior to COVID. And, you know, her feeling was it's generational, because we have a lot of people who are retiring, and the next generation below, the boomer generation, is a smaller generation. And so there's just not as many people to choose from. So that was, I just think, an interesting perspective that, you know, somebody who's looking at it and saying, we had this problem before COVID, you know, and at least in the Columbus market, we're back to 5% unemployment, which for Columbus is, you know, normal, but it was that way before COVID.
Yeah. A lot of people just a few months ago, a lot of the older population retired. They said, the stock market, look at what the stock market did. And they just said, okay, I've got enough money now. I don't have to work anymore. Yeah.
So the other part of generational is that a lot of the older people are retiring from jobs that the younger people don't want.
Or they won't do. Yeah, they won't do.
Yeah, there's some basic things, truck driving. I mean, trucks drive this country, you know, moving Amazon's stuff from point A to point B. Drones can't pick up a heavy piece of equipment necessarily flat across the sky. That's not a job that a lot of young people want. It's not an attractive IT skill type of job. It's not something you can, you know, use a remote control and do. So generationally, there's going to be a lot of needed skills that aren't going to get filled.
The DOT's not helping that industry either.
Oh, yeah.
Robin, what time is Tom coming on?
9:30.
So I've got about 10 minutes, right? Can you send him a text and just let him know that we're going to be just slightly late? Okay. Yes, Tim.
I was just going to say, in the high-tech industry too, I think that we're having a shortage of developers and being able to get developers, but I think what has opened that market up is all these other companies now are allowing virtual participants in their company, where historically you had to live in that area. And because now it's more even within the United States, it's a global, they can go wherever they want. So, you know, so you're seeing an exodus of people that were working for a company, didn't want to work for them. They're going to, you know, they're first applying to the big boys like Microsoft, Google, and all those, dumping up, you know, as many as they can, and they get them anywhere. But I think you've also got a shortage because you don't, where you used to have a local pool and you could go find people, now those people have the United States or the local to go market themselves on.
Absolutely.
Without having to move.
Before we go into the next phase of this discussion here, I neglected, mainly because I wanted to, but I have an obligation, guys and ladies, that I must adhere to. All right, and that is, you notice I'm wearing a Georgia shirt today. Okay, this was one of the most painful things that I've had to do all right, in a while. But I had a bet with my good friend Tommy in the back that whoever lost the Clemson-Georgia game, Clemson was ranked third, I think, and Georgia was ranked fourth. Very first game that they played, and Georgia killed us. And Clemson was way overranked. They just lost to NC State last weekend and dropped to 25th, which may still be too high. So we had our run. But yeah, so I'm having to wear Georgia paraphernalia today. Thank you to my good friend Tommy Breedlove in the back, who is a big Georgia Bulldog fan. So anyway, that's the reason why you are not seeing me wear Clemson paraphernalia today. All right. So Tommy, kudos. Well played, my man. All right. So let's talk about the 7 business models that may rule the next decade. Again, these are futuristic ideas from the Singularity University. So we're going to talk about a couple of different business models or economies, okay? The first one being the crowd economy. Crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, leveraged assets, think of staff on demand. These are essentially developments that leverage the billions of people that are already online today and the billions of people that are coming online already. They've all revolutionized the way that we do business. Again, let's go to a couple of examples here. Airbnb, Uber. Consider they're leveraged assets, right? These are assets that are owned by different people, but yet you can utilize them when you want to without having to buy them or purchase them. So these assets are getting higher utilization. They're paid for as they're used. Think of also other examples like a fractional sales manager, a fractional CFO, virtual assistants, virtual bookkeepers, personal concierge services. These are things that you can now go online and you can find them, you can source them, and that's becoming a very, very prevalent business model that's evolving very rapidly today. The second model is called the free data economy, and this is a platform version of the old bait and hook model, essentially to bring customers with free access to a cool service and then making money off of the data that's gathered about the customer. It also includes all the developments spurred by the big data revolution, which is allowing us to exploit micro demographics like never before. So take, for example, Google, Facebook, Twitter. Google search queries per day back in 1999 was about 500,000 search queries per day. Today, it's 5.6 billion queries per day. So while more users are becoming more aware of the valuable data that they exchange in return for Google's free search service, this is probably a tried and true model that's going to continue to succeed in 2020. The third model is called the smartness economy. This type of an economy, it layers on an intelligence. Take, for example, in the earlier 20th century, you could take any kind of a product or a tool. If you were looking for a new business, you could take any kind of a product or a tool like a hand drill or a washing board and add electricity to it, and you get an electric drill or a washing machine, okay? AI is going to become the new electricity, or it already has. And so, in other words, you can take any existing tool today and you can add a layer of smartness to it. So, for instance, you've got a cell phone, you add a layer of smartness to it, you've got a smartphone. A stereo speaker becomes a smart speaker. A car becomes an autonomous vehicle. Okay? These things right here have progressed so quickly Angel and I were talking the other day about our first cell phone. Our first cell phone was a bag phone. Anybody remember those? Anybody have one of those? Yeah. They asked me if I wanted a cell phone mounted in my car or a bag phone. I said I want a bag phone because I want to be able to take it on my boat, right? But I remember those days. Had the big rubber antenna on it about like this right here and a bag about this big. Imagine walking through an airport today carrying one of those. So the fourth model is called the closed loop economy. And in nature, nothing is ever wasted. Waste or debris of one species becomes the foundation for the survival of another species. Human attempts to mimic the entire waste-free systems have been dubbed biomimicry. If you're talking about a certain kind of a product, this is biomimicry. That Falcon right there, the stealth bomber, notice the similarities? Or cradle to cradle if you're talking about designing a new city or a new kind of a city, or simply what's called a closed loop economy. So those models will grow more and more prevalent with the rise of environmentally conscious consumers and the cost benefits of these closed loop systems. So let's look at a couple of examples here. The plastic bank was founded in 2013, and so a consumer could bring in old, used plastic bottles, deposit them at these plastic banks. The plastic banks would recycle them, sort them, and take care of it and pay these people in anything from Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi, to cash. So this is a global system. This is not just in the United States. And so that's how people, they're closing the loop on plastic. That's one example right there. Another example is a beer called Toast Ale discovered that there is a tremendous amount of waste in the industrial bread market out there. So these bread bakeries that are producing bread on a massive scale throw a lot of breadcrumbs, the end pieces, things like that, end up in the landfill. And so Toast decided to form a new business where they brew beer, and they've partnered with these industrial bread manufacturers. They use their bread to make the beer, there again closing the loop on the waste. Okay? Another example is DoorDash is collaborating with Feeding America to use DoorDash's powerful technology with delivery and logistics technology to connect restaurants with surplus food to the homeless shelters and the soup kitchens. This keeps the food out of the landfills and into the bellies of those who need it. Okay, again, closing the loop. This was a brand new one to me. I'd never heard of this before. Has anybody ever heard of a decentralized autonomous organization or a DAO? That's what it's called. The young people call it a DAO. I had never heard of this before. So essentially, at the convergence of blockchain and artificial intelligence since a radically new type of company, one with no employees, no bosses, and nonstop production. It's a set of pre-programmed rules, or what they call a smart contract, and it determines how the company operates, and all the computers do all the rest. Okay? There's no managerial hierarchy. All the decisions are made by the investors' votes. Everything is transparent, so none of the rules can be changed by any one person. So you don't have a president of this company that can make a dictatorial type of decision or a hierarchical type of decision. All right? This is a business model that is set up to where you set up parameters, you establish it all in rules and a smart contract, you set it all up in a computerized system, and it runs itself 24/7. And it just continues to perpetuate. Some examples. A charity, for example. You can accept membership and donations from anyone in the world, and the group can decide how they want to spend the donations. Again, you set all the parameters up in the smart contract. The computerized system automatically distributes the money. You know, once you determine who you want to send it to, you set it up. As the money comes in, it gets distributed, and that's how it works. You don't have to have any intervention. Another example could be a freelance network of contractors could create a network and pool their funds for shared office spaces or even software subscriptions. A third example, if you're like me and you don't have $10 million to set up your own venture capital company, you could create a venture fund that pools investments and capital and votes on the ventures to back. The money can then be repaid back to the DAO members. I encourage you to look into a company called, I'm not sure how quite to pronounce this, Ethereum. That's how I say it. Ethereum? Have you heard of these guys? Yeah. These are probably one of the largest design outfits for what's called the decentralized autonomous organizations out there. The sixth model is called the multiple worlds model. So we no longer live in one place. We have a real world persona and we have an online persona. And the delocalized existence is only going to expand. With the rise, Tim, I bet you're seeing this very prevalently. With the rise of augmented and virtual reality, we're introducing more and more layers into this equation. You'll have avatars for work and avatars for play, and all of these versions of ourselves are now opportunities for new businesses. We've all mastered the virtual call or a Zoom, right? But tomorrow we'll be diving deep into what's called the spatial web, moving back and forth between multiple virtual worlds and our physical reality using technologies like VATMs or VATMs. Did I say it correctly? Is it VATMs, I believe? And the spatial web net to navigate what's known as the metaverse. Has anybody done a spatial web meeting yet? Yeah, Tim, Arrow?
Well, fast story. So, highly recommend that everyone go and buy an Oculus. It's $299 and it's the future. It's still a little bit rudimentary. The last year, Microsoft Ignite decided to do an augmented reality, or actually mixed reality keynote. And so I went and got the Oculus as opposed to the Microsoft one, which is $3,000. But the perspective was interesting. So there's a company called AltSpace that will host virtual meetings. So they'll go and take multiple camera angles of this room. And then when you are at home, you can literally sit in any of these chairs. I can look at you. I can look at you. I can stand up. It's weird when someone in front of you stands up. You can look around them, but it is a completely different experience. And it really is, I think, where things are going to go. Practical examples, for instance, that Microsoft used. So Toyota has the system where you put on the Microsoft headset and you can open up any Toyota vehicle and automatically it'll detect what vehicle it is, how it should be. All the schematics from the factory are then immediately shown to you while you're looking at it in real life. And so you'll see what's wrong and what isn't where it should be, and you can very quickly figure out how to fix it. So that's one example of the augmented reality side of that.
It's coming, guys and ladies, and our kids, this is the world they're going to be playing in. The seventh model is called the transformation economy. We're in a process of migrating from what's known as the experience economy or sharing experiences today to what's known as the transformation economy. So an example of the experience economy, Starbucks went from being a coffee franchise to a third place. It's neither a home nor work, but it's a third place in which to live your life. There's a lot of people who spend a lot of time in Starbucks, okay? Whether it's meeting socially or they're working there. I've seen people work there all day long in a Starbucks. But buying a cup of coffee now has become an experience, or Starbucks, for instance, a caffeinated theme park. The next iteration of the idea of this is called a transformation economy, where you're not only paying for an experience, but you're also paying for a life transformational experience. Some early versions of this model can be seen in fitness companies like CrossFit, where the experience is generally bad for you. You go to this old warehouse and you're sweating and the experience isn't so good. It's kind of bad at the time, but what you're looking for is what you're going to look like, how you're going to feel 3 months from now. It's a transformation, a transformational experience that you're looking for. So they're not only looking for a pleasurable experience, they're looking for challenges that transform them. Has anyone ever been to a Tony Robbins event? Yeah, a couple people here in the room. Most people attend a Tony Robbins event because they're looking for a life-changing experience, a transformational experience. So just to recap, these are the 7 new trends that we ought to be paying attention to that may rule the next decade. Again, this is all based on information from the Singularity University. And so I encourage you to do your own research into this idea. But what I wanted to do was just sort of bring it to the forefront for you. So what all this tells us going forward is that business as usual is now business unusual. And to unlock the next wave of growth, companies should probably embed these innovations in a disruptive new business model. Experiences are going to become better, cheaper, and faster. Better in that we'll be solving real problems for real people, right? Cheaper in that a lot of customers, technology today is allowing us to do things cheaper for some of our customers. So a lot of our customers are looking for the same product or they're looking for more for less, right? Faster in that these new business models are no longer a force of stability or security. These models here, these are designed for speed and agility, okay? Any thoughts, comments, or questions?